Hello, good evening. In previous classes, we've been talking about PHP and various different attributes of PHP. Now, we will be starting and learning about how we handle the form data from HTML, process it with PHP, and return the answer back or require response back on a web page. So, in today's lecture, basically, we will be talk about how we create a form, how we read the data using PHP from a form and process that data and then generate a response based on the data that has been provided. Okay, so a very simple exercise, simple task, but nothing very complicated, but allowing us to understand what basic elements of form are, what is post method, and how we basically connect PHP with our form and generate a simple dynamic web page. This is Dr. Shan Bharti. If you're here for the first time, kindly don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you receive these tutorials regularly with a notification. Let's begin. The idea again is to create a simple HTML form, and then we will be basically able to process that HTML form and read the data of HTML form using PHP and then return a response and generate a completely new page. Okay, so let's begin. Now, for our own sake, let's just create a simple HTML. Okay, and if I increase the font size so it's more readable, there we go. I think that's a little too big, but let's go for it. And then I go and file, save as. So what again, now because we are creating a server side code, as discussed previously, that whenever we working with PHP and server side code, it has to be saved at a particular location, which is in our case XAMPP folder. We have been talking about XAMPP folder in previous classes as well. What you need to do is you need to install XAMPP because we need a server, and in our case we have installed the local server. So wherever you have installed the XAMPP software, which usually by default is saved in C drive, in my case I have saved in my E drive, I go inside that folder if there is something called htdocs. Okay, this is a simple folder that holds your basic PHP and all your websites. Okay, inside this htdocs we create another new folder, which can be, for example, my PHP. Let me name it as PHP project. Okay, yeah, PHP forms. Let me just name it forms for now. Okay, because I'm going to work on PHP forms for a couple of next classes, so let's just use this particular folder. I create a folder inside this PHP forms. Okay, now htdocs is basically a folder on your server, and inside that folder, instead of placing files directly on the server, we create a folder and we save everything inside this folder. So remember to do that. Every PHP file or HTML file that belongs to belongs to a PHP or that needs to be read by PHP as a server form needs to be on the server or in an accessible area. Okay, so in order to make things simplify, we basically save it inside htdocs, create a folder and save it here. Now this is going to be my first file, so I name it as html.php. Okay, oh sorry, index.php. Now index.php, again we have talked about this multiple times. Index is basically the name of your first HTML file that will be visible to the user. So whenever user enters your domain name, your URL, the first page that loads is basically your index.php. Every server is configured to read your index file. It can be index.php, index.html, index.htm, as long as it starts with index. Extension depends on what you are basically trying to do, not necessarily PHP, but index, the file has to be there. So let's start using this index file.php. So next time when I want to access this folder, basically I will just be using index.php and it will create this file. Now I have saved this as a PHP, however it still contains HTML and I can do that quite easily, no problem with that. Okay, so head file and \head. Okay, and within this let's just give it a simple title. Oh sorry, title title tag, \title. This is PHP form reading example, and then inside here let's just very quickly create a body. Okay, and \body. Inside the body let's have h1 and then \h1, and then here PHP form reading example. Okay, so this is what we get. I like to style this again. Now this is something that we've been doing regularly and I like to do this. Sorry, now there's a COLER color. For example, this can be dark gray, semicolon BACK background color. I think I can give it hashtag 333. I remember only few hashtag colors. So this should create us or gives us a simple HTML page with a title. Then what we need is we need to create simple form. So in order to create a form, let me just write, for example, paragraph tag. This is form. In fact, let's not just use it paragraph tag. Let's just use h2. Okay, h2. So we have an heading, and now in order to create form, we go and we write something called a form tag. Simple as that. Start and end. Okay, so what this form basically means that any input data or any input fields that you have, you put inside a form. Okay, so HTML recognizes this as a single form. Adding all the elements inside a form is again extremely necessary and beneficial if you are working with PHP, because PHP will read the entire form data. Instead of reading each individual text elements, we basically create a group of all the input elements, and we group that as a form, and we send the form data, right? So hopefully it makes a little bit sense. So managing your input fields becomes a lot more easy. So within this form, basically we need to provide some basic information. For example, we give a name of it. Okay, what should be the name of this form? Because remember, you can have more than one form in your page. Okay, and you might require to read different forms at different level or different points. Okay, so it's always recommended to give a name. So for example, data form form. Okay, so I name it my data form. Okay, then the most important next thing is something called action. Okay, now action basically means that what should happen to this particular form when the user clicks on the button submit. Okay, we will talk about this action in a moment. And then there is something method, another called method. Okay, method, and what should we write here? Let's just write post. Okay, now post. Basically, these two things are absolutely essential in a form. Okay, action basically defines the destination on a destination page or destination file that needs to be read in case of this OK button or submit button. For example, what should happen when you go into login form and enter your name and URL? Okay, what should we do then? In fact, let's just create that thing. So in this case, let me login data. Okay, so data, this becomes my login data. I create a form and I go inside here. I create an input type. Okay, input type, this can be text. Okay, and name can be txt text name. And then similarly, we come here, we give another input, and this time we give it, let's just give it, for example, password, or for example, father name, right? The name. Oh, sorry. Text, and this name will be txt fathe father name, fname name. That should be it. So basically, now we have created a simple form that contains two input fields. Then we create something called another input, and this time it will be submit. Okay, sub type can be okay, so this time it will be submit, submit submit, and name can be again btn submit submit. What this basically means that now we have created a button which has basically of type submit. Now there is difference between creating a simple button with OK, cancel, or button called submit. For example, again I come here, I can go into my input field and I can create something called button button. Okay, what this basically means can now we have created something called button, or we can create any other form. However, once we create something called submit, by submit means that it is a type of special button which will submit your form to a PHP server, or will submit your form to a server. Let's not use word PHP right now for. Okay. So what we have done now is simply we created a simple form, we gave it a name, we gave it something action, we filled method post to be discussed right now. Okay. So this is a simple form. Now the basic idea is that this is a simple HTML form, user gives his data, clicks on submit. After the user clicks on the button submit, now this is where the trick starts. Once, for example, in his username password he submits, that data is to be sent to the server, which in our case is PHP. The server reads this data, extracts the information from this input field, process that data and then sends a response based on that. Okay, this is something we have been talked about in our PHP classes all along. So this is what we need to do, or this is what we need to understand. When we click on submit, this submit is so powerful, this button is so powerful that it will automatically take your form data, only your form data, nothing else. Once you click on this submit, it will take your form data and submit and send all this form data to something called action. It will automatically take all the values from your input fields and send it to the page or whatever action you have specified here. That is why this page is very essential. That is why this attribute itself is very essential. The submit button automatically built-in has this code that whenever user clicks on the submit button, what you need to do is you need to read and extract all the form content, package it and send it to PHP. That is called action. So basically the action is to send it, but to send where we need to receive a PHP file. For example, read data, I create and I will have a PHP. So this is a file that I now need to create. And then this is called method. Now method, basically generally we use two major types of method, get and post. Post method is used, as the word indicates, to post the data to the server. Get method is used to retrieve or get the data from a server, if that makes sense. However, both can be used interchangeably nowadays. There are certain advantages of using post and get. Okay, I will talk about the difference between post and get, where to use which, in a completely separate class, because the discussion would actually be quite long and the difference is very essential to understand for that. For now, we have used the post method. Just simply to understand, this will post the data onto the server. Now when the data is sent to the server, there are multiple files on the server. Which file, which code should read your particular file? Because I can have thousands of files, or I can have thousands of pages on my server. So this action actually says that once user clicks on a submit button, this is the file on my server that needs to read the form data. Whatever is inside this form, forget about the rest of the code. Only the major concern is that once I submit, whatever is inside this form data is sent to the server. On the server, there is a file called read.php using a method called post. Hopefully that makes sense. Now the next step is we create a new file. We create something called PHP and this. So this is a PHP file that will read the data that was created here, and this file again is on the server, so we need to go save it as, and on our server on a XAMPP folder, again htdocs, this is the folder where all the user files go on every server in the world almost, and then PHP form, this is the sub file I create. Here I will save this file as readdata.php. okay, save it. We now created a file called index.php that is supposed to have a basic structure. Initial home page. Once user clicks on that login information, clicks on the submit button, the read data file is loaded. Why? Because we have pulled this action here. So we inside this read data, let's just put something called echo hello HTML form. Sorry, just give me form, form form. Control S. Nothing else for now. Let's just test the system. Now remember, I told you, because we are using PHP, always remember that we go on to our control panel, click on the control panel. This will start your control panel, which in my case I've already set up and running. Okay, so this is what it's showing actually. So in this case, once the control panel opens, you need to start your Apache server, you need to start your MySQL server. Okay, these two server requires or needed to be running. I think MySQL you cannot, you can leave it off for the moment because we are not using MySQL at the moment, but as just for the sake of it, I've always found that we just leave it running anyway. Basically, yes, you need to run these two things server. Again, on your control panel, you have to run the Apache server. Only then you would be able to access your system. We run it because now we are running the server on a local host. Now my PC is behaving like a local machine, local server on my local machine. Then we go on to the browser and then we enter the URL. In our case would be localhost. Come on, enter. Okay. Once you press enter, sorry, it went somewhere else. LOCLHOST host, enter. all is okay, your server is running, you should see a simple default Apache page. Okay. That's because my server is running properly. If there is a problem, if you don't run the server, you write localhost here, there will be nothing displayed here. So we just check it that XAMPP is running, Apache is okay, this is green, indicating that everything is running and fine. We come into here, we write localhost and everything is running fine. Then we go inside our page, and remember we created a folder called PHP data, I think, PHP form, sorry. Okay. So now in order to access this particular file, we come here, we go inside localhost and we write PHP form. Okay, that's the folder name. We only give the folder name here, PHP form. PHP, and this is not mandatory depending on how the structure goes, but if I press enter now, you would find that my data is being loaded. Okay. We don't need to write PHP form if you have saved the structure directly inside your XAMPP folder, htdocs folder. So for example, if you come here on your E drive, XAMPP htdocs, this is the default folder. So when I write localhost, just localhost, press enter, this is the index file that loads up. That's the default index file. Okay. Some people tend to delete everything here and then start and keep their own files here. So as soon as they write localhost, their own website comes into play. I usually don't recommend it. I prefer to create my own folders because I will be working on multiple projects, multiple files. I don't want to temper the structure. For me, it's more easy and convenient that if I create a subfolder inside htdocs, in this case HP form, and keep this current project files inside this. Then in order to access this on the browser, we again go back on my browser, we write localhost only /PHP form /. PHP form is actually the name of this folder. Now since inside this folder I have a file called index, regardless of its extension PHP or HTML, I have a file called HTML index. That's why I don't need to write the file name here. Every server has by default configured to load the index file, whether it's index.php, HTML or HTML only. Okay. That's why I just wrote the folder name, and by default this became my URL now. Okay. Inside this, as you can see, PHP form read data, login data, this and this. Okay. So we can come back here, and in my here, for example, I can say enter name and a name, and then I can give a BR here, and then I can say enter father name. Then again I can have another BR here, Control S, and then I come back here. Again we need to refresh the server, and enter name and enter father name are there. Okay, so once we are here, now what we need to do is we need to enter the data. For example, if I name this BHATTI and I give the name of my father, click on submit, hello form. Okay, now what happened? What happened is that we created a simple index.php that contained a simple form, nothing complicated. Okay, this form has things inside it. First, a submit button. This submit button by default has a code that whenever user clicks on this submit, okay, whenever user clicks on this submit, read the form data and send that entire form data to a file called read this, whatever we give here. Okay, that's the first thing. This form has a submit button. This submit button second has by default the code inherited inside it that it reads the form data, sends the form data to a PHP file on your server using something called action as an attribute, a method called post. Okay. So now what we have done is, as soon as I click, the form data that has given here is read by my system and sent to the server. On my server there is a file called read data. This is file that I've created because again I am creating the entire website, so I need to manage it. On the server I created this web page. This is again purely PHP page. Now in this case again I have not used PHP right now. This is a simple HTML page. I just saved it as PHP. You can save it as HTML as well, nothing to worry. Then you come here on read data. This is a pure PHP file that actually does contain PHP code. In this case it says hello form. Now our task is to basically read the form data. How do we read the form data? Again this method comes into play. Now remember I told you that once we click on submit, the entire form data is encapsulated and then sent to the server using action or to an action PHP using method post. So once we come back here, now basically we process this post method ourselves. Okay, what we do now is we check this post method. So for example, we use something called $name is equals to $_post post. Okay, now this is a variable name that I just created. Okay, we have talked about variables in previous classes. So this is a simple variable I create is equals to, then I used again $_post with a capital letters. Post being in capital letters indicates this is a predefined variable name. This is a variable that is already created by PHP. It's not my created. We know this because it's in capital letters. Okay, if that makes sense. So this capital letter is just a hint that it's a predefined variable that's already created. We use post because we used a method called post here. This basically means this data has been sent to the server using post. So we receive the data again using the same post. So it's like a stamp. So if you send the data from TCS, you will receive the data from the TCS guy, if you understand. Or if you use, for example, any other courier service, Leopard courier service, to send your package. So you go to the Leopard, you send the data using Leopard, and at the receiving end again they will also need to receive from the Leopard. It's not possible that you send the data from TCS and the receiver gets it through Leopard. That's like interchanging the organizations. Same basic concept here. So you send the data using post here. Okay, that's the method. That's how the data from this one page has been sent to another page on the server. This page again needs to read the same data. Now, how this data variable works, this is typically an array. Why an array? Because it reads the form data, and a form can contain multiple input fields. Okay, form can contain multiple input fields. So this is my simple form. This form contains input, this form contains input. So there are two inputs and then input submit. There can be as many as I want. So because of that, what we do is we create this as an array, and we come here and we declare it as an array. Oh, it's already been declared, we actually use it as an array. So now what we do is we create $_post. This is a predefined variable that has already been created by PHP. Post because we have sent the data using post. Again, there is a get, we can use the get as well, and there are a few other ways of managing these things as well. But for now, we just use get and post as well. So once we come back here, post, now we need to understand that we have something called text name. So what we do is we come back here and we write text name and semicolon. And then again I use $father name is equals to $_post bracket start bracket close quotation marks txt, this time F, I think F was small or capital, F and N capital. Okay, so F and N a M E name. Now what has happened here is, let me show you in terms of an example. Okay, so we printed these two things here, and now we come back here and I say echo this on the browser, use something called BR, and if possible use paragraph tag, or for example H2, so that it's readable. Then dot, we use something called $name. Okay, Control C and Control V and F name. Okay, now what we did here is that we used a PHP, we code initially something, and we read the variables from our post method. Okay, make sure to give semicolon. Then we printed those variable names, that values are here, onto the browser. I save this file, go back into the browser, refresh the web page, then come back here, enter the name again, click on submit, and here we go. Now see this, it's a different file, readdata.php. It's not the previous file. Suddenly a new file is there and it has printed the names there. The names that I entered in my text field. Click submit, those names are here. What happened now is that as soon as you clicked on submit, the PHP, as soon as you click on the submit, the HTML form data is read and encapsulated using your URL and sent to a file on a server called readdata.php. That file reads the data from that file, from that URL, and then processes it. And this process, in our case, we just simply extracted the data from that URL variable, saved it in our own custom variables, and then printed it on our screens. Understood? So the post method is the default method, but post variable is basically a default variable present by default in PHP. This uses to this is used to read the data that was sent through the form. Okay, and which form or which data to read, basically we use the variable name here. So whatever variable name we entered in input field, we basically use the same variable name here. Okay, now these are two different files. What we have done is we have used one file and sent the data, and another file has read that data and then process that data and then send it back to the server or back to the browser. So in this case, this is all being done at the server end. So client initially sees this index.html page. Okay, they only see this page which has a username and password. So I enter the data, click here and click on submit. As soon as I click submit, the data is sent to the server. On the server where the data should go, because server again is a huge area, it might have huge files. So we gave it inside the code that read.data.php, which is basically using this action here. So when we click on submit, the action is to send this entire data to read.php. Okay, this file reads the data using a method called post. So we go into this method, we create a variable here. Basically in method it's a method that how the data would be sent. So this data is sent through your browser URL. Okay, as I said, I will talk more about post and get methods in next class. But post is basically method of sending, and the data, the way it is sent is that it's sent in an array form to this server file. Okay, through your URL of your browser actually. So data is embedded and encoded with your URL, and that data is sent to the browser, to the server. On the server there's a file called read data which receives this data, and that has by default this array variable created for us, post method. This array, each element item can be referred to by the name of this text input field. Whatever name we give here, these names are basically referred here, and we process those names and printed them. Okay, this is how basically we simply read the form data, send it to the server. On a server we create another file which receives those data, and then it can process, verify, validate, save it onto database and process it, whatever you want to do. So whenever we click on login, this is what typically happens. The data is sent to the server. On a server there's a specific file, for example read data. It reads the data, validates the data, confirms the data, and then maybe by how does it read, confirms the data, then it connects to the database, fetches the records from database, matches and searches the data. If it matches, it says okay, then it might go and load a third file or fourth file and then process the data similarly. Okay, so this is typically what happens when we create a simple HTML file or HTML form. Hope it's clear. We will try to do a few more examples of this and hopefully make things even more clear as you go along. This is Dr. Shanbati. If you are for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. See you in next class. Thank you very much.